Hi, everybody. We're back today to read more of Wonder. When we last left off yesterday, Augie was about to take a tour of his new school, Beecher Prep, with some of the students Jack, Will, Charlotte, and Julian. So, our next chapter that we're starting off is titled The Grand Tour. Jack, Will, Julian, Charlotte, and I went down a big hallway to some wide stairs. No one said a word as we walked up to the third floor. When we got to the top of the stairs, we went down a little hallway full of lots of doors. Julian opened the door marked 301. "This is our homeroom," he said, standing in front of the half-open door. "We have Miss Petosa. They say she's okay, at least for homeroom. I heard she's really strict if you get it for math, though." "That's not true," said Charlotte. "My sister had her last year, and she said she's totally nice." "Not what I heard," said Julian, "but whatever." He closed the door and continued walking down the hallway. "This is the science lab," he said when he got to the next door. And just like he did 2 seconds ago, he stood in front of the half-open door and started talking. He didn't look at me once he started, which was okay because I wasn't looking at him either. "You don't know who you have for science until the first day of school, but you want to get Mr. Holler. He used to be in the lower school. He would play this giant tuba in class." "It was a baritone horn," answered Charlotte. "It was a tuba," said Julian, closing the door. "Dude, let him go inside so he can check it out," Jack Will told him, pushing Julian and opening the door. "Go inside if you want," Julian said. It was the first time he looked at me. I shrugged and walked over to the door. Julian moved out of the way quickly, like he was afraid I might accidentally touch him as I passed by him. "Nothing much to see," Julian said, walking in after me. He started pointing to a bunch of stuff around the room. "That's the incubator. That's that big black thing is the chalkboard. These are the desks. These are the chairs. Those are the Bunsen burners. This is a gross science poster. This is chalk. This is the eraser." "I'm sure he knows what an eraser is," Charlotte said, sounding a little like Via. "How would I know what he knows?" Julian answered. "Mr. Tushman said he's never been to a school before." "You know what an eraser is, right?" Charlotte asked me. I admit I was feeling so nervous that I didn't know what to say or do except look at the floor. "Hey, can you talk?" asked Jack Will. "Yeah," I nodded. I still hadn't really looked at any of them yet, not directly. "You know what an eraser is, right?" asked Jack Will. "Of course," I mumbled. "I told you there was nothing to see in here," said Julian, shrugging. "I have a question," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. What exactly is homeroom? Is that like a subject?" "No, that's just your group," explained Charlotte, ignoring Julian's smirk. "It's like where you go when you get to school in the morning, and your homeroom teacher takes attendance and stuff like that. In a way, it's your main class, even though it's not really a class. I mean, it's a class, but—" "I think he gets it, Charlotte," said Jack Will. "Do you get it?" Charlotte asked me. "Yeah," I nodded at her. "Okay, let's get out of here," said Jack Will, walking away. "Wait, Jack, we're supposed to be answering questions," said Charlotte. Jack Will rolled his eyes a little as he turned around. "Do you have any more questions?" he asked. No," I answered. "Well, actually, yes. Is your name Jack or Jack Will?" "Jack is my first name. Will is my last name." "Oh, because Mr. Tushman introduced you as Jack Will, so I thought—" "Ha! You thought his name was Jack Will?" laughed Julian. "Yeah, some people call me by my first and last name," Jack said, shrugging. "I don't know why. Anyway, we can go now." "Let's go to the performance space next," said Charlotte, leading the way out of the science room. "It's very cool. You'll like it, August." Okay, and the next chapter is titled The Performance Space. Charlotte basically didn't stop talking as we headed down the second floor. She was describing the play they had put on last year, which was Oliver. She played Oliver even though she's a girl. And as she said this, she pushed open the double doors to a huge auditorium. At the end of the other room was a stage. Charlotte started skipping toward the stage. Julian ran after her and then turned around halfway down the aisle. "Come on," he said loudly, waving for me to follow him, which I did. "There were like hundreds of people in the audience that night," said Charlotte, and it took me a second to realize she was still talking about Oliver. "I was so nervous. I had so many lines and all these songs to sing. It was so hard." Although she was talking to me, she really didn't look at me much. On opening night, my parents were all the way in the back of the auditorium, like where Jack is right now. But when the lights are off, you can't see that far back. So I was like, where are my parents? Where are my parents? And then Mr. Resnick, our theater and arts teacher last year, he said, Charlotte, stop being such a diva. And I was like, okay. And then I spotted my parents and I was totally fine. I didn't forget a single line. While she was talking, I noticed Julian staring at me out of the corner of his eye. This is something I see people do a lot with me. They think I don't know they're staring, but I can tell from the way their heads are tilted. From the way their heads are tilted. I turned around to see where Jack had gone to. He had stayed in the back of the auditorium, like he was bored. We put on a play every year, said Charlotte. I don't think he's going to want to be in the school play, Charlotte, said Julian sarcastically. You can be in the play without actually being in the play, Charlotte answered, looking at me. You can do the lighting, you can paint the backdrops. Oh, yeah, whoopee, said Julian, twirling his fingers in the air. But you don't have to take the theater arts elective if you don't want to, Charlotte said, shrugging. There's dance, or chorus, or band. There's leadership. Only dorks take leadership, Julian interrupted. Julian, you're being so obnoxious, said Charlotte, which made Julian laugh. I'm taking the science elective, I said. Cool, said Charlotte. Julian looked directly at me. The science elective is supposedly the hardest elective of all, he said. No offense, but if you've never, ever been in a school before, why do you think you're suddenly going to be smart enough to take the science elective? I mean, have you even studied science before? Like real science, not like the kind you do in kits. Yeah, I nodded. He was homeschooled, Julian, said Charlotte. So teachers came to his house? Asked Julian, looking puzzled. Puzzled means confused. No, his mother taught him, answered Charlotte. Is she a teacher? Julian said. Is your mother a teacher? Charlotte asked me. No, I said. So she's not a real teacher, said Julian, as if that proved his point. That's what I mean. How can someone who's not a real teacher actually teach science? I'm sure you'll do fine, said Charlotte, looking at me. Let's just go to the library now, Jack called out, sounding really bored. Why is your hair so long? Julian said to me. He sounded like he was annoyed. I didn't know what to say, so I just shrugged. Can I ask you a question? He said. I shrugged again. Didn't he just ask me a question? What's the deal with your face? I mean, were you in a fire or something? Julian, that's so rude, said Charlotte. I'm not being rude, said Julian. I'm just asking a question. Mr. Tushman said we could ask questions if we wanted to. Not rude questions like that, said Charlotte. Besides, he was born like that. That's what Mr. Tushman said. You just weren't listening. I was so listening, said Julian. I just thought maybe he was in a fire, too. Geez, Julian, said Jack. Just shut up. You shut up, Julian yelled. Come on, August, said Jack. Let's just go to the library already. I walked toward Jack and followed him out of the auditorium. He held the double doors open for me, and as I passed by, he looked at me right in the face, kind of daring me to look back at him, which I did. Then I actually smiled. I don't know. Sometimes when I have the feeling like I'm almost crying, it can turn into an almost laughing feeling. And that must have been the feeling I was having then, because I smiled, almost like I was going to giggle. The thing is, because of the way my face is, people don't know me very well, don't always get that I'm smiling. My mouth doesn't go up at the corners the way other people's mouths do. It just goes straight across my face. But somehow Jack Will got that, and I smiled at him. But somehow Jack Will got that I had smiled at him, and he smiled back. Julian's a jerk, he whispered before Julian and Charlotte reached us. But dude, you're gonna have to talk. He said this seriously, like he was trying to help me. I nodded as Julian and Charlotte caught up to us. We were all quiet for a second, all of us just kind of nodding, looking at the floor. Then I looked up at Julian. The words supposedly, by the way, I said. What are you talking about? You said supposedly before, I said. I did not. Yeah, you did, Charlotte nodded. You said the science elective is supposedly really hard. I heard you. I absolutely did not, he insisted. Whatever, said Jack. Let's just go. Yeah, let's just go, agreed Charlotte, following Jack down the stairs to the next floor. I started to follow her, but Julian cut right in front of me, which actually made me stumble backward. Oops, sorry about that, said Julian. But I could tell from the way he looked at me that he wasn't really sorry at all. Okay, that's all for today. So today we started to learn a little bit more about some of the characters that Augie is going to be going to school with starting in the fall. So the next chapter we'll read next time is titled The Deal.